Have you ever felt like everyone around you is moving forward while you are standing still? Not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but slowly, almost quietly. One friend gets a better job, another buys a house, someone else starts a business, and suddenly they are doing well. You scroll through your phone, and it feels like the same story everywhere: success, growth, progress. And then there's you, still trying, still figuring things out, still wondering if you are doing something wrong. I remember the exact moment I felt this clearly. It wasn't a big event, it was just a normal evening. I was sitting alone, looking at photos online, old classmates, old friends, people I used to compare myself to without even realizing it. But now, the comparison was impossible to ignore. One had just bought a new car. Another posted about their investment success. Someone else was celebrating a promotion, and the comments were full of words like, "Proud of you. You deserve it." So inspiring. I kept scrolling. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. Everyone has their own path. Everyone moves at their own pace. I had heard that before, many times, but that night, it didn't feel true. It felt like an excuse, because deep down, I had one quiet thought I couldn't ignore. Why is everyone else getting ahead? And I'm not? I didn't feel jealous in the usual way. I didn't want their exact life. But I wanted something: proof that I was moving forward too, proof that my efforts meant something. But the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable it became, because I couldn't find a clear answer. I was working. I was trying. I was doing what I thought was right. But the results didn't match the effort. And that's where the doubt started. Not loud, just a quiet voice in the background. Maybe you're too late. Maybe you missed something. Maybe you're just not as capable. I didn't say those words out loud, but I felt them in small moments, in quiet nights like this one. That evening, I closed my phone, but the feeling stayed. It followed me into the next day, and the day after that. Everywhere I looked, it felt like people were building something, growing something, becoming something, and I was just maintaining, just surviving. That was the hardest part. Not failing, but feeling like nothing was really changing. Like I was running, but not moving forward. A few days later, I met an old friend. Someone I hadn't seen in a long time. We sat down, talked about life, caught up on everything. And of course, the topic came up: work, money, progress. He shared his story, how things started slowly, then suddenly improved. Investments, opportunities, better decisions. I listened carefully, nodded, smiled. But inside, that same question came back again. Why not me? At one point, he paused, looked at me, and asked a simple question. What have you been focusing on these past few years? It sounded like a normal question, but something about it made me stop, because I realized I didn't have a clear answer. I had been busy. Yes, working, living, trying to keep up, but focusing on one clear direction, on something that truly mattered long term, I wasn't sure. And for the first time, that thought felt more uncomfortable than anything else, not because of what others had, but because of what I might have been missing. That night, I went home and sat in silence for a long time. No scrolling, no distractions, just one question. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. What if the problem isn't that others are ahead, but that I've been moving without direction this whole time? That question stayed with me longer than I expected. Not in a dramatic way, but like a quiet presence in the background of everything I did. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to my own life. Not to judge it, not to criticize it, but simply to observe it more honestly. And what I saw was uncomfortable in a very subtle way. I was busy almost all the time. My days were filled with tasks, responsibilities, small goals, and constant movement. From the outside, it looked like I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I woke up, I worked, I handled what needed to be done, and I tried to stay productive. But when I looked deeper, I noticed something I had never really admitted before. Most of what I was doing was short term. I was solving immediate problems, responding to daily demands, and keeping things running. But I wasn't building anything that would still matter a year from now. There was no clear direction, no long term intention behind my actions. It felt like I was constantly moving, but not actually going anywhere meaningful. That realization didn't hit me all at once. It came slowly, through small moments. One afternoon, I sat down to plan my week, something I had done many times before. I wrote down my tasks, my deadlines, the things I needed to finish. But then I paused and asked myself a simple question. If I keep doing this for the next 6 months, what will really change? I stared at the page for a long time. The answer wasn't clear, and that uncertainty made me uneasy. Because for the first time, I saw that effort alone wasn't enough. Being busy wasn't the same as moving forward. Around the same time, I began noticing something about the people I had been comparing myself to. At first, I only saw their results, the promotions, the money, the visible signs of success. But when I looked more carefully, I started to see patterns behind those results. They weren't just working harder, they were working with direction. They had chosen something specific to focus on, and they stayed with it long enough for it to grow. While I had been spreading my energy across many different things, they had been concentrating theirs in one place. That difference seemed small at first, but the more I thought about it, the more important it became. I realized that I had been chasing progress in a very scattered way. Whenever I saw a new opportunity, I felt the need to explore it. Whenever something looked promising, I gave it a bit of my attention. And over time, that habit created a pattern. I was always starting, but rarely continuing. Always trying, but not committing deeply enough for anything to truly develop. It wasn't a lack of effort, it was a lack of focus. That idea was uncomfortable, but also strangely clear. It explained something I had been struggling to understand for a long time. Why my results felt inconsistent. Why progress seemed slow, even when I was doing a lot. A few days later, I met the same friend again. This time, I asked more questions. Not about how much he was making, but about how he made his decisions. He told me something simple. In the beginning, nothing worked, but I chose one thing and stayed with it longer than I felt comfortable. That sentence stayed with me, stayed with it longer than I felt comfortable. I thought about all the times I had stopped too early, all the times I had doubted myself before anything had a real chance to grow, all the times I had switched direction because something else looked better in the moment. And slowly, something began to make sense. Maybe the difference wasn't talent, maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it was just the ability to stay with one path, long enough to see where it leads. That idea stayed with me in a quiet but persistent way, not as motivation and not as pressure, but as something I couldn't ignore anymore. For the first time, I stopped asking what I should do and started asking a different question. What am I actually willing to stay with, even when it becomes boring, slow, or uncertain? That question felt simple, but the answer wasn't. Because when I looked at my past, I saw a pattern very clearly. I was interested in many things, curious about many paths, and always open to new opportunities. At first, that felt like a strength. It made me flexible, adaptable, and willing to try. But over time, that same habit became a problem. Every time something felt difficult, I had another option. Every time progress slowed down, I found something new to focus on. And without realizing it, I had trained myself to leave, right before things had a chance to grow. That realization was uncomfortable but also honest. So I made a quiet decision, not a big announcement, not a dramatic change, just a small shift in how I approach things. I chose one direction, not because it was perfect, not because I was completely sure, but because I was willing to stay with it. At the beginning, nothing felt different. The work was still slow. The results were still unclear. There were no immediate rewards, no visible signs that I had made the right choice. And that was the hardest part, because I was used to quick feedback, used to knowing whether something was working or not. But this time, there was only patience. Days passed, what then weeks. Some moments felt productive, others felt like nothing was happening at all. And more than once, I felt the familiar urge to change direction again, to try something new, to escape the uncertainty. But each time that feeling appeared, I remembered something simple. Growth often looks invisible until it isn't. So instead of reacting, I stayed. I continued doing the same work, in the same direction, even when it felt repetitive, even when it felt slow, even when I doubted whether it would lead anywhere. And gradually, something began to change, not in a dramatic way, but in small, almost unnoticeable ways. I started to understand things more deeply. I made fewer mistakes. I became more confident in small decisions. It wasn't exciting, but it was real. For the first time, I wasn't starting over. I was building on something that already existed. That feeling was new to me. Before, my progress always felt like a series of disconnected attempts. But now, there was continuity, a sense that each day added something to the last. And with that came a different kind of confidence. Not the loud kind that comes from quick success, but a quiet one, built from consistency. One evening, I sat down and looked back at the past few weeks. Nothing in my life looked dramatically different from the outside. There were no big achievements, no obvious signs of success. But inside, something had shifted. I no longer felt like I was being left behind, because for the first time, I knew where I was going. That feeling of direction didn't change everything overnight, but it changed how I experienced each day. Before, my attention was always divided. Part of me was focused on what I was doing, while another part was constantly looking around, comparing, wondering if there was something better I should be chasing instead. Now, that second voice became quieter, not completely gone, but less convincing. Because when you choose one path and stay with it, something interesting happens. You stop measuring your progress against everyone else, and you start measuring it against your own past. And that shift changes everything. Instead of asking, why am I not where they are? I started asking, am I better than I was last month? Sometimes the answer was yes, sometimes it was unclear, but at least the question felt honest. As the weeks continued, the work itself didn't become easier, but it became more familiar. I knew what to expect. I understood the challenges more clearly. And because of that, I wasted less energy resisting the process. That made a bigger difference than I expected. Because before, I wasn't just working. I was also doubting, comparing, and constantly questioning whether I was on the right path. That invisible effort drained more energy than the work itself. Now, with fewer distractions in my mind, I had more energy to actually improve. And slowly, that improvement started to show. Not in a dramatic way, but in ways that mattered. I noticed I could handle problems faster. I made decisions with more confidence. I didn't feel the need to change direction every time something felt difficult. Those changes were small, but they were consistent. And consistency was something I had been missing for a long time. One afternoon, I received a message from someone I hadn't talked to in a while. We caught up briefly, and at one point, they said something that caught my attention. "You seem more focused lately." It wasn't a big compliment, but it stayed with me because it reflected something I had been feeling but hadn't clearly recognized yet. I wasn't doing more than before. I was just doing less, but with more intention. That difference was subtle but powerful. It meant I was no longer chasing everything. I was building something. And even though the results were still developing, I could feel a quiet confidence growing underneath, not based on what I had achieved, but based on how I was approaching things. That evening, I thought about the version of myself from a few weeks ago, the one who felt left behind, the one who kept looking at others and wondering what was missing. And I realized something important. Nothing external had changed dramatically. The world was the same. Other people were still moving forward. But I no longer felt stuck because I was no longer scattered. I had direction. And sometimes that is the difference between feeling lost and finally feeling like you are on your way. Looking back now, the most surprising thing is not what changed in my life, but what didn't. The world kept moving at the same speed. People around me continued to grow, succeed, and move forward in their own ways. Social media still showed the same stories of progress, the same milestones, the same visible signs of success. But something inside me was no longer reacting the same way. That quiet feeling of being left behind was gone. And not because I had suddenly caught up, not because I had achieved something big, but because I finally understood something I had missed for a long time. The problem was never that others were ahead. The problem was that I was moving without direction. For years, I thought progress meant doing more, trying more things, taking more opportunities, staying busy, and never slowing down. But now I could see it clearly. Progress is not about how many things you do, it's about how long you stay with the right thing. That truth sounds simple, almost too simple, but living it is different because staying with one path requires something most people avoid: patience. It requires you to continue even when there are no clear results, even when nothing feels exciting, even when you start to doubt whether your effort will lead anywhere. And that is exactly the moment when most people stop, including me, in the past. But this time, I didn't. I stayed. Not perfectly, not without doubt, but consistently enough to see something I had never seen before. Real progress is quiet at the beginning. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel impressive. It grows slowly beneath the surface, while everything on the outside looks the same. And then one day, you realize you are no longer the same person who started, not because of one big moment, but because of many small, consistent ones. That realization changed how I see everything now. When I look at others, I no longer feel that pressure to compare because I understand that what I see is only the result, not the process behind it. And for the first time, I respect the process more than the result. That shift gave me something I didn't have before: peace. Not the kind that comes from having everything figured out, but the kind that comes from knowing you are moving in the right direction, even if it's slow, even if it's quiet, even if no one else notices yet. One evening, I sat alone again, just like I did at the beginning of this story. The same silence, the same stillness, but a completely different feeling. There was no question in my mind anymore. No, why not me? Because now I had my own answer. Not something I read, not something someone told me, but something I understood through experience. You don't fall behind because others move faster. You fall behind when you keep changing direction before anything has time to grow. If this story made you think about your own path, take a moment to ask yourself one simple question. What is one thing you are willing to stay with, long enough to see it grow? And if you want to learn English through calm, real life stories like this, stay with us.